Hello and welcome. This is the Zen community of Oregon, making the teachings of the Buddha Dharma accessible to support your practice. New episodes air every week.
I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. And I take refuge in Sangha. Good to be taking refuge with you. So I'd like to open with a poem. This poem's by Rosemary Watala Traumer. And somebody shared this poem with me this morning, and I'll share it with you now. I want a word that means okay and not okay. More than that, a word that means devastated and stunned with joy. I want a word that says, I feel it all at once. The heart is not like a songbird, singing only one note at a time, more like a tuvan throat singer, able to sing both a drone and simultaneously 2 or 3 harmonics high above it. A sound, the tuvans say, that gives the impression of wind swirling among rocks. The heart understands swirl, how the churning of opposite feelings weaves through us like an incessant breeze, leads us wordlessly deeper into ourselves, blesses us with paradox so we might walk more openly into this world so rife with devastation, this world so ripe with joy. So that poem was called For When People Ask. I want to start a series of talks on Dharma practice for times of crisis or uncertainty, mainly in response to our current political ideologies and agendas that are being pursued at the national level of government right now. And today we're going to start by naming 8 practices. And then over the course of the next couple of months, I want to spend time deepening into these fundamental practices. So I was reflecting earlier today, or over the course of the last couple of weeks, about the Buddha's style of teaching. And as many of you know who have studied at least even a little bit or have been in the Sangha for a while, the early Buddhist teachings, which are now recorded in the Pali Canon, often we have like different series of lists. The Buddha taught in lists, which makes it easier for us to remember, but also the Buddha was always responding to the people and the situation that the people that were in of, whoever he was talking to. So somebody would come to him with a question, or he would encounter people who were arguing about something, and then he would give a teaching in response to that question or that situation or that quarrel or, whatever it was. And so in that we have to one person or to a group of people, he offers the 7 factors of awakening, and to another group, the 10 paramitas, which are very similar, but different teachings were called out of him in response to situations. The Dharma didn't change. It was just what he chose to emphasize in the different situations. So in that spirit, the practices that I want to share in these 8 practices for working with crisis or difficulty aren't made up for this moment. They're practices from the tradition that I would like to emphasize in this moment. They're in a way, and this is the beautiful aspect of the Dharma, they're in a way timeless practices that are applicable whenever we face friction or challenge in our lives. So as many of you articulated last week when we had the sharing time, like some of the friction or challenge that we face in our lives is like feels really personal. Maybe it's like, threats to our physical well-being, or health scares, or relational dynamics in our families or communities. And in a way, all of these are connected to the greater whole, or connected to the collective. It's part of interrelatedness, that the collective affects us on a personal level, and also the person, each of us, is part of the collective. So now the 8 practices. First, honor the wisdom of your body. Our bodies are wise. They feel and respond to information coming in through our environment. So in the single unified field of embodied awareness, all response is welcome. And all response is, you could say, information. Doesn't mean that we just react blindly to whatever we're feeling, like, oh, my body is wise, so I'm going to rage because I'm feeling rage. I'm going to fight because I'm feeling fight. I'm going to excessively worry because anxiety is flowing through me. But also, suppression is not the way either. To honor the body's wisdom is to make space to feel whatever we're feeling. To drop into the body, which we're practicing all the time in meditation, in mindfulness. So drop into the body and allow the sensations, feelings, and emotions that are present to be experienced and to be processed through the body's awareness. Now, the beautiful thing about meditation and mindfulness is when we let our bodies, when we feel our bodies with our bodies in our direct experience of body, feelings and emotions are allowed to move through. Like that poem, like they don't even need to be named or understood through our mental processing system. We can just feel them. And we feel a lot. We feel everything. And I also want to name that we are experiencing in this country an abuse of power on a national level. And attempts to undo basic practices of equity and care for folks who have been historically and continue to be marginalized or have marginalized identities, including the earth itself. And this, for many of us, may activate trauma responses in our nervous systems, or alerts in our nervous systems, in our bodies. Responses of fear, or freeze, or rage, or fight, or anger, or grief, or overwhelm, or feelings and sensations that are hard to name or feel. And that's all like happening right now. So what practices help us tend to our bodies and our nervous systems? Or what practices help you? Sometimes this is very personal. What practices help you tend to your body and nervous system? What practices help you feel and listen to or allow your emotions and feelings to move through. Bayo Kumalafe quotes this Yoruba saying that says, "The times are urgent, slow down." Or when the times are urgent, slow down. Which can sound so counterintuitive, right? Like we're feeling all of this feeling and then we want to do something with it. But sometimes that doing something is coming from like just fear and reactivity. And to slow down lets us like harvest the wisdom of the emotion without just reacting and potentially causing harm to ourselves or others. And I keep coming back to this practice that Chosen Roshi would do every single morning at the monastery when she was in the meditation hall. Sometimes, most of the time, she would teach it to us. She would guide us through it. And it's the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is a deeply embodied practice. It starts with mindfulness of the body. So really like letting ourselves feel our bodies with our bodies. I started to do that in the beginning of this meditation. For those of you who are here, like moving through each part of the body and letting the body feel itself from the ground up. And then the next foundation of mindfulness is to feel our feelings, to notice what feelings are present, to allow space for the emotions that are present. And again, we don't even need to, in this practice, label them, although sometimes that can be helpful. But it's more about allowing and feeling. It's like in that poem, The Guest House, Rumi's Guest House, like just everything, letting everything that visits be welcome. And then the next foundation of mindfulness is being aware of mental activity, aware of, and this is, I think particularly important, is to notice like the stories that we're telling ourselves, the worries that are getting activated, the memories perhaps that are coming up. All of this is information, but we're also like, we don't have to be at the mercy of the thoughts and beliefs that are being touched in us. I think a big belief that can get touched in us in times like this, and again, I'm talking about the political situation, is like, I have to respond and I alone am responsible. And so catching that one, because that one can lead us to isolation and burnout really quick. But often is triggered in there for a lot of us, just because of the way that we were raised or what we're taught. We're used to thinking very individually. And what's happening right now, we can't do it all. And that's overwhelming, that's scary, that's a lot of things. Being able to be with ourselves as we undo some of our beliefs, or at least see which ones are getting activated right now, and having compassion for ourselves. So that's part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is like being able to practice loving kindness and compassion for whatever is happening in our bodies, in our feeling bodies, in our emotions, in our mental process. And then the final foundation of mindfulness is recognizing, remembering, finding in our direct experience the refuge of awareness itself. That's also part of our body. As I was saying, like spaciousness, quiet. It's part of the resource of our embodied experience. And even when our bodies are activated or feeling a lot, but when our minds are activated and feeling a lot, we can learn to recognize and rest in the space that holds it all, that allows it all. The quiet that's prior to thought, but allows all sound. And that's part of what Zazen, like when we sit Zazen, especially when we sit for a little over 20 minutes, we can often drop into even just a little bit to that quiet, spacious mind of awareness, which is always present, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time to settle the noise, to step back from just reacting to whatever is happening and to really be able to rest in awareness. And then as we practice, this is the good news, like as we practice more and more, like that recognition can actually be very immediate. We don't have to do a big practice to touch into awareness itself, although the stabilization of it is still helped by doing a period of meditation. But also in honoring the wisdom of the body, and I promise there are other practices I want to name. I'm just like highlighting this one right now. The question is like, we're taking in, if you're watching the news, and I know everyone is probably at least a little bit, like we're taking in like some bad nourishment right now. And we're doing it because we're staying engaged. So we're bearing witness to what's happening because we have compassionate hearts. But how do you feed the body? How do we feed the body what's nourishing? How do we take care of our nervous systems as well? So I named the 4 foundations of mindfulness as like a tenet of this practice that we're all a part of. It's Buddhist tradition as one way. But, what are other ways that support your body, the health of your body? Art, exercise, movement practices, eating good food, taking in beauty, breathing deeply, being around others with regulated nervous systems, whether that's coming to meditation or going to yoga classes or being in spaces where people are creating art together. I recently joined a pottery studio, and that's a great refuge. And therapy, the natural world, like being around others with regulated nervous systems is important. It's a refuge. That's honoring the wisdom of the body. Next, insight practice. The Dharma teachings remind us that right here, in our present experience, in the imminence of this, there is a refuge that can't be taken away. All koans point us back here. This is Zen's version of all roads lead to Rome. All Dharma practices eventually lead us back to what can't be taken away, what is always present. Awareness itself, but the actual direct experience of that refuge. The questions of who is it that's aware? What is this? What is your original face? Before a single thought arises, who were you before your parents were born? All of these questions point us back to help us remember something about the truth of who we really are. And sometimes in times of crisis or angst or hopelessness or fear, our true nature shines even brighter because certain things are kind of stripped away. So Zen awakening reminds us that we can know freedom or liberation in any situation, in any circumstance, no matter what is happening. Our true nature is right here. And so, insight practice. like I said, I'll continue to teach on these topics. So we'll spend a whole week or more with what insight practice is. But we're kind of always going back to this. It's a pretty crucial part of the Zen tradition, is this reminder, this question. Is still, every time I see Hogen Roshi, he asks me what is always present. And I love that. I love that about him. Next practice, reflection on impermanence. Hakuin Zenji likened impermanence to a black fire, in that we don't see it coming. So we're surprised when conditioned things change. I've talked on this topic. It's this is one of like the 3 marks of existence that the Buddha taught. So it's like a very foundational teaching. Hogen Roshi also used to say, if your Dharma talk doesn't include impermanence, it's not really a Dharma talk. So we talk about this a lot. But still, like in talking to Dharma practitioners who have been practicing for many, many years, who have meditated on impermanence, who've attended the death association several times, who, that has been a foundational practice and contemplation in their lives, are surprised when something changes. Like, oh, even that? We do that. The Buddha reminded his disciples before he died that all compounded things are subject to vanish, because, again, they were surprised that the Buddha was dying. Even the Buddha dies. So our bodies, our relationships, our work, our societies are subject to change. The positive side of that is whatever is happening now will change, will continue to change. Change is our nature. In Buddhism, we're invited to contemplate impermanence as a regular part of our practice life. And when we do this, we see or remember that everything we love or depend on is of the nature of change. It will decay, it will die. Loss is a part of life. Another way I think of this teaching is all beings are a life cycle. All of us. All of us were born and will die. And sometimes I imagine us as a life cycle. There's this image before I really started Buddhist practice. I used to imagine people, and I can't quite remember where I got this from, but I used to imagine people as a full life cycle, like that I could see, like all of their past and all of their future, and that I could see my own. And that included like birth and death. And it's an interesting practice, because there's like a tenderness at the beginning and the end of our lives. Like there's something very like fragile and mysterious, that we were born at all. Where do we go when we die? And that like each of us is a whole life cycle. There's this kind of parable or story of Ajahn Chah, who was a great Theravada Buddhist teacher who lived more recently, contemporary teacher. And the story is he had this favorite cup. And whenever he was giving a Dharma teaching, he would ask that he receive his tea or whatever drink he was drinking in that cup. And at one point, a student asked him about like non-attachment and impermanence, and like he seemed pretty attached to this cup, and what was the deal? And his response was that he loved the cup because he knew it would break someday. Like he already had that in his awareness, and that made him love it even more. Impermanence, in a way, when we contemplate it, it isn't just to like prepare us for loss, but it can help us connect to what truly matters. To love our life for its dynamism, its wildness. To love our life and all the elements it contains. And love can be like big and look so many different ways in that use of the word love. Like I said, we'll come back to all of these as the weeks progress, but just giving you an overview. Next, teaching the 4 divine abodes. What are they? Loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. They're called divine abodes because they're qualities we can cultivate and dwell in. A clear and stable mind, and that's equanimity. A heart grounded in love, compassion, and joy. It's actually quite subversive to practice the 4 boundless qualities of the heart-mind. In doing so, we remember that we're interconnected and that it's not our responsibility alone to save the world. I find when I don't know what to do, practicing loving kindness for myself, for others, for the planet, for the world, is a way of staying connected. Staying connected from like the deepest vow heart. Like, I don't know what to do, but I'm leading with compassion, taking refuge in compassion, and I'm open to what is an appropriate response or action. And loving kindness is the remedy that the Buddha offered when practitioners were afraid. So it's a remedy for fear and anxiety. We can practice loving kindness for ourselves when we're experiencing fear or anxiety. And we can practice loving kindness for all those beings, all the people we can imagine maybe experiencing fear or anxiety, or that we know who are experiencing fear and anxiety right now. And for all beings who are caught in the grip of the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, delusion. The Buddha says, it's recorded in the Dhammapada, hatreds never cease through hatred in this world. Through love alone they cease. This is an eternal law. Next practice, Dharma protectors. We can ask for help from the bodhisattvas. Jizo Bodhisattva has this vow to enter any hell realm and guide beings to liberation. We can ask Jizo to protect those who are most vulnerable, including parts of ourselves. All of the bodhisattvas are available to help us. And that can be like just such a great refuge in this practice, to have a practice of opening to help beyond the human realm. there's a lot more I could say there, but moving on. Vows. Staying connected to our vows, to our hearts, to what really matters. Now, this is always important. It's particularly important when we feel at crisis, or we don't know what's going to happen, or what is going to happen looks rather grim. I find that in times of crisis or uncertainty, my vows clarify. Or I feel a deeper connection to the truth of the Bodhisattva vow. Vows, maybe you have personal vows or intentions for your life. Sometimes we call it our heart's deepest aspiration. Maybe you're connected to the precepts, or just starting to explore the precepts. The precepts are infinitely deep and can be guides to help us find the next right step or best step. There's a teaching from the Zen Peacemakers order, and it's the 3 tenets of the Zen Peacemakers. The first is not knowing. And this is a practice that we're doing constantly. Zazen is a practice of coming back to not knowing. Letting ourselves step back from all the judgments and projections and reactivity that we're putting onto reality, and just come back to the actual direct experience, whatever it is in our bodies. And then it's bearing witness to the suffering and joy of the world from a place of more clarity, more being with what is, and then taking action. When we bear witness from a place of not knowing, sometimes surprising things emerge as the next appropriate step. And sometimes we don't know what's going to emerge until we're in the situation, and then we're saying something that surprises us. That's one of the beautiful benefits of this practice, is learning to really trust the present moment and just keep showing up. And then we might find ourselves or find something emerging through us that maybe doesn't feel like it even came from us. Next, practice the Sangha jewel, refuge in Sangha. Thich Nhat Hanh said that the next Buddha is the Sangha. The Dharma is transgressive. We're working to uproot or see through greed, hatred, and ignorance in our own hearts. It's what the Buddha called the 3 poisons. And in a lot of ways, our society has been running on greed, hatred, and ignorance. And the Buddha used this analogy of our practice, Dharma practice, as swimming against the stream. I say this a lot, but it's helpful to remind ourselves, because sometimes maybe we think this should be easier, or we should be further along, or the world should change because we've been practicing for a few years now. And it's we're swimming against the stream. It's in us. In the Gata of Atonement that we chant, if you come to do retreat at the monastery, we chant it every morning during Sesshin. And it says, one translation I like, which isn't the exact translation we use, at the monastery, but it says beginningless greed, hatred, and delusion. Like forms this kind of twisted legacy of twisted karma that we're a part of. That's part of the stream we're swimming in. That's in us. And so, and it's like part of the habit energy of our collective, and it's in our own heart. So to take refuge in Sangha, in togetherness, is necessary. We need each other. We need support always, but especially in times of difficulty. I think, one question I have like circling in my own heart is like, what are ways I can discover new or more Sangha in my life? It doesn't have to only be Buddhist practitioners. One thing I really know from living at the monastery for a long time is that we're stronger together. We're stronger together. I never felt like so as like safe as I ever felt in my life. And living at the monastery was like the safest I ever felt. And I was not like living for myself alone. I was living for everyone else, and I could feel everyone else was living for me too, like included in that. And the monastery is like this unique system that like when we live there, even for those of you who've done retreat, we're like practicing as one body, and we can really feel that. But how do we build Sangha that's as strong as the monastery outside of the monastery? Because it's possible, I believe it's possible to really like let ourselves be like a little more nested, a little more thread together with our neighbors, with our art community, with, whoever we're connected to our family, to our Buddhist Sangha. And then last practice, creativity. Make art, share poems, sing, dance, illustrate, tell stories, make food for those you love, make time for creative expression. Art making is an embodied practice. Art is healing. It opens us up to different parts of ourselves. It connects us to the collective. It's a way to process. It's a way sometimes to be in community together. It's a way of practicing being imperfect. When we create, we're in touch with creation on an embodied level. Like love is being expressed through our being in all its various shades and colors. Don't even have to call it love. It's just like happening through our hands. And sometimes it's destructive, and sometimes it's beautiful, and sometimes it's dangerous. It's all those things. And creativity allows breakthroughs that like exist beyond like the thinking mind. Something that's never been given life is being given life through our hands, through our voice, through our body, through our dance. And as systems crumble before our eyes, something new will be born. We will rise from the ashes. It's the positive side of impermanence. And our creativity is part of that process. To take refuge in the creativity that you are. We are all artists. We'll end with another poem by Rosemary Watala Traumer. This is called In a Dangerous Time. I think of the bones of the unsung rib cage the way they protect the heart, how bone too is living, how it constantly renews and remakes itself. I think of how ribs engage with other ribs to expand, to contract, and because they do their solid work, they allow the heart to float. This is what I want to do, to be a rib in this body of our country, to make a safe space for love. There is so much now that needs protection. I want to be that flexible, that committed to what's vital, that unwilling to yield. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Zen Community of Oregon podcast, and thank you for your practice. New episodes air every week. Please consider making a donation at zendust.org. Your support supports us.